Okay. How was yesterday's recording? It was good. I've never heard of it.
Yeah, very good.
Excellent. Okay.
He bought a booster speaker. It was very powerful.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so nice. It was like,
Very nice.
I thought it was
It was like you were here.
no, it was that thing right there. Wow. And they were asking questions. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Hilchos Trumos Perek Beis. What page are we at? 592. 592 in the one volume Rambam. Perek Sheni Halacha Aleph. If you good. So now we can talk about which species are chayiv in truma and also halachic status. Kol eichel adam, anything which is meant for human consumption, hanishma, which is protected. No, it doesn't grow hefker. So gedul min haaretz goes from the ground, as opposed to, let's say, mushrooms don't grow from the ground; they grow on the ground. Chayiv in truma, it's you're chayiv in truma. It's 217 in that Rambam. Mitzvah, I say, it's a positive mitzvah lahafish menarish kain to separate the first separation for the kain. The first of your grain, your wine, and your oil, did you give to the kohen? So we see the Torah says you have to give to the kohen these produce. Now, if that's the case, who says you're chayiv in truma anything besides for grain, wine, and oil? Who says, for example, apples are chayiv in truma? Says just like grain, wine, and oil, it's human food. It goes from the ground, but vegetation. The Eish L'Bom has people who own it, right? You don't usually have wild wheat growing, or at least in most cases. Shenemar, it says they're going to call your grain, so it's clearly talking about normal grain, not wild grain. So to any other produce, vegetation, the same status. It's also chayv and truma meiser. So this is halacha aleph. All produce, or at least all fruits, we'll see vegetables is a different story, that is grows from the ground. It is private, someone owns it. And it is it's guard, it's not hefker, it's chayv and truma. Halacha base. Now it goes to different types of species. Hakar shinin, vetch, which is like a kind of animal beans. Animals eat it. Avapisha ain't a machal. It's not called human consumption normally. And since in a year when there's a scarcity of food, it is eaten by people. So is veg a human food? It depends what you have available. If there's wheat, no. If there's nothing, yeah. So chayav and truma meiser, therefore it's chayav and truma meiser, no matter what, if you're going to eat it. If you're not going to eat it, you give it to the animal, for example, you're not chayav and truma meiser.
So in the years which there's
no, b'chlal, across the board. If you're going to decide this tonight, I'm in the mood of veg. There's plenty of wheat. I want to eat veg. You chayav and truma meiser. These kinds of herbs which are translated as hyssop and oregano, things like that. You planted it. Now here we're going to talk about why you planted it. That's just not a gift. I don't care why you planted it. You planted it for behema, fine. But the fact is that it's a human food, therefore if you eat it, chayav meiser. When it comes to these herbs, why'd you plant it? If you planted it to eat for humans, chayav meiser, chayav meiser. The same applies to anything else. These are like herbs of this nature. Depends why you planted it. But if you plant it, however, for your animals, even though after planting it, it was still attached to the ground, you said, you know what, this is a good patch of oregano, I'm going to use this myself, return your potter, because it goes after the b'shas you planted. Now, what is the moment of planting? When you stick it in the ground, you drop it in the ground. Okay, whatever that moment is, whatever you say that moment, that's when we go after. Because the machshav you have, when it's still attached to the ground, is irrelevant. All the malam b'chat. So what if these type of things go wild by themselves? So if it was a chatzar, that the place they grew wild by themselves was by default guarded because you had some kind of fence around it. Because they're by default considered human food, right? Veg depends on the year, but because people eat it, so therefore it's always considered human food. These things,
even though you didn't grow it.
Sure, you grew it.
For example, you said it grows wild.
No. That was. I'm going now back to veg. When it comes to these types of grain, these types of herbs, rather, the assumption is they're always considered human food, and therefore, as long as it's taka guarded, you're chayiv. If it grew up by itself in the chutzner, you're chayiv. If, however, it's not guarded, in other words, it grew wild by itself in somewhere where it's not protected, then it's potter. So again, the three klalim has to be a human food. It has to be vegetation as opposed to mushrooms that don't go on the ground, and it has to be protected. Page 217 in that Rambam.
Protected meaning you don't want nobody else to go near it.
It's in a context. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's supposed to hefka as opposed to where it's. Yeah. Gimel. You have garden vegetables that are not eaten. A lot of this parak, a lot of different translations of different species. Not clear, but we'll use the Ram over here. He goes the seeds of turnips, the seeds of radishes, the seeds of onions, gates of pen. So these are garden vegetables. You eat them, obviously. You don't eat the seeds, though. The seeds are meant for planting. You don't eat them. I mean, today you can buy pumpkin seeds, eat them. But basically, this time the Ram was not considered. The food, the seed wasn't the edible part. But I have no idea. I'm not a farmer. I hear you. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, good. I hear you. I don't know what to say. So it's positive for mice. In other words, if you're going to eat the seeds, you have a collection here of radish seeds. I'm not going to plant these. I want to eat these for lunch. You can eat without mice. The seeds are not considered human food. When it comes to ketzach, which is called caraway seed over here, chayav turmaiser, that is chayav into a meiser because people do eat it. Okay, good. So in other words, if I have
it's used in baking and stuff, whatever.
Right. So I have here a crop of onions. I harvest the onions. I take out the seeds. I want to eat the onions. I want to eat the seeds. The onions require turmaiser to be taken from them, or theoretically, depending on. Okay, so let's say, yeah, right. You have to turmaiser from them because it's not a yerek. It's zernigina. But the seeds don't require too much mice taking them because it's not considered human food. Now, tomorrow is shel tilton. This is called here blossoms of chilba. Elsewhere, I think it's translated as fenugreek. Yeah, but elsewhere I saw it translated as fenugreek. I can find them because same thing. The same thing. Sure, thank you. Okay, good.
That's right.
So v'shel chardal and so these are the tomorrow, the blossoms, like the leaves. Like the part that grows, like the leafy part, the blossoms.
The coriander, yeah, the coriander is there's the green part and there's the.
No, this
the
isn't
root
coriander.
part.
This is fenugreek.
Fenugreek also has leaves and it has the root.
Right, like carrots also, right? Technically speaking, there's like also
Right.
no one eats it though, but good, fine, yeah. That's the green part sticks out of the ground.
Right.
So,
but
it's fenugreek. If you Google, you see a picture right away.
yeah.
V'shel chardal and mustard seeds. V'shel pearl and white beans. V'shel tzolof and capers. V'akafreis v'shel tzolof and the bark of the capers. Those are part of Truma Ma'aser. And Pri not considered produce.
Capers is not considered produce?
The blossom part.
Or the blossom.
When we say this, when you planted them for the purpose for the seeds. So that's when we say that the part that's not seed, the part that's the blossom, that's not considered food. You didn't plant it for that part. It comes automatically. You can't choose. There's no menu. You have to have the whole thing. Well, you planted it for the seeds, so you planted it for the seeds. So therefore, the blossom is not considered real food. And if you want to snack on it, you don't need to take Truma Ma'aser. If you planted the chachila for the produce part, for the blossom part, then it's chayiv in Truma Ma'aser. Same thing applies to caper berries. Chayav no chayiv in Truma Ma'aser automatically. That's considered produce. So again, it depends if it's human consumption, considered food for people. Hey. Right, if I want to eat the chveis, leaves of a maple tree, right? It's not considered human food. You don't have to take Truma Ma'aser. This is considered the same thing. Over there, it's not. You never need to do Truma Ma'aser. Over here, it depends why you planted it. Okay. Hey, kuzbar shazar liara. It says zara lezera. Excuse me. You have coriander that you planted it for the seeds, right? You want to eat the seeds. Yarek pater Truma Ma'aser. Then the vegetable part is pater Truma Ma'aser. The same principle, right? Because you planted it for the seeds, and the part that's the vegetable part, the yarek part, I guess the leaves it would be. And I don't know what coriander seed looks like, so I'm just imagining over here. So then to think that part is not considered your kavana, it's not considered food, and it's pater Truma Ma'aser. Zar yarek, if you planted it for the vegetable part, for the greenery, then mafish Truma Ma'aser min yarkes. In that case, even though you planted it only for the vegetable, you have to take Truma Ma'aser from both. And we'll see how that works, what that means in what context. In other words, Ram will say, doesn't mean Stam you always take from Ma'aser for both. He's going to specify. I'm sorry. Thank you. Similarly, okay, sorry, no, this is Pashat, right? Mafish Truma Ma'aser min yarkes min zera Pashat because they're both considered human food. The zera is always human food. And the yarek is human food if you plant it with that kavana. Good. When you're talking about shevis, which is dill, apparently, yeah, that you planted it for the seeds because you want to eat the dill seed. Yarka parter, then the vegetable part is parter because you didn't plant it for that. You're not going to eat that. You didn't plant it for that part. And therefore, if later you want to eat it, you're not chayv truma meiser. If you planted it for the vegetable part of the dill, in that case, you have to take truma meiser from the zera and the yarek. But you don't have to take meiser from the seed capsule. You translate it over here. So in other words, the seeds have like a case, and that part, that's not the kavanah to eat that. That part you don't have to take truma meiser. That you can eat it without truma meiser. Zara l'zaydin. If you sowed it for the sake of the seed capsules, then mafish truma meiser me'azera u'meniyara u'menazaydin. If you planted it and you want to eat after that part, among other perhaps, then you take meiser from everything. Similarly, cress and wild cress.
Like lettuce and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That you planted them for the seeds. You have to again take meiser from both the seed and the vegetable. When do we see all these times you have to take meiser from the seed and the yarek? What does that mean exactly? In other words, till now we're saying all the whole entire time when he says you have to take meiser from the zera and the yarek, you have to take meiser from both of them because they're all both edible. But now the Rambam specifies you have to now look at what the kavanah what you gathered. I'm talking about the kavanah you planted it. So when you planted it, we said that taka makes a kavanah if you have to take meiser. But now that we're saying that, for example, over here, when you planted it for the seeds, you have to take meiser from the yerek, which is by definition edible, and the zera as well. So how do you take meiser from both? If you collected the vegetable part to eat that part, you have to separate meiser, and only afterwards can you eat. That's as far as the yerek goes. Now the seed, you don't have to take meiser from the seed yet, though. You're not eating that part. When you let it dry. Yes, if azera shaloy, then you gather the seeds from those parts. In other words, you ate the fruit before you ate it. I mean, not the fruit, sorry, the vegetable part. Before you ate it, you must have taken truma meiser, obviously. Now you leave the seeds. You don't eat those. Those seeds you let them dry in the sun, and then eventually you collect them and you eat them. So then when you dry them out, if you gather them together, azera shaloy, the seed part, then you take meiser from the seeds. So you have to take meiser apparently from them separately. Because they eat on different occasions. Okay. Vav. Hayidakais, the vegetables. These now, ad kan, we talked about, let's say, onions, for example. That's not a yerek. A yerek is a vegetable, like a greenery. Even though it's human consumption. Ein and chayam b'maiser, they're not chayv b'maiser, and or truma for that matter, the Rambam will clarify, only midrabban, not minat Torah. It says b'maiser, tvu azarecha, the grain of your planting, or the yield of your planting. Things like grain, vegetables, who are not considered in the grain category. It seems to me the Rambam says, the same thing applies to Truma. But it says regarding Truma, your grain, your oil, your wine, and your oil. Called the Meilu has to be compared to these things. Truma of vegetables, is just like Meiser. So the Rambam was of the opinion that vegetables is only midrabanan in terms of ma'aser and truma, not manatoid. And it's relevant to know, of course, because of various situations you make, etc.
But he was able to expound by saying that grains goes on anything that grows and includes fruit trees.
Yeah.
So why can't you expound on
so the Rambam doesn't clarify, right? So what is it about?
It's the same expounding.
Yeah. What is it about the generalization of grain, wine, and oil that encompasses, let's say, fruit trees, but not vegetables? He doesn't clarify. He just says it's not similar. So,
in a nutshell, explain what would be different between two and a.
Oh, whether if you're a non-kohen and you eat the truma, if you
and olives Einstein, but two and
two is grain like wheat, barley, and those
like what?
Grain, wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and rye. Yerek, vegetables is like cucumbers and greeneries, things like that.
Potatoes.
Potatoes are in a gimel. That's how we talk about potatoes. We go in the category of radishes and sinayin and radishes and turnips and things like that. Onions and garlic.
Yeah, they call those tubers.
Yeah, yerek is like the word. It's like greenery, basically, really, in many ways. It's like So I'm not sure exactly what species fall in which category. Honestly, that's a good question.
Well, olives grow on a tree. So
olives are chayv through mice for sure.
Olives, that's clear.
This is clear.
No, you asked why.
I see. Oh, yes. Good. Okay.
From
Good.
olives.
Right.
From olives.
Right. That doesn't say that. But however, he has good. That doesn't say it though. Oh, he does say Yisrael. Very good. I hear. Okay. Good. Okay. Zion. Good. Yeah. Oh, so what about how come onions though? When we said Locha Gimel, Kubi and Locha Gimel. even though he's talking
of vegetables that
one
grow
second, we
under
spoke
the
in
ground.
Hilchos Kilayim about Zerina Gina and Yerukis. It wasn't the same thing. Yeah, because Zerina Gina are planted in a different way than Yerukis. So Zerina Gina, Halacha Gimel, onions and radishes is not synonymous with Yerukis, with the vegetables. So it's a little different. You plant it much more. We talked about that in Hilchos Kilayim in the beginning.
In more quantity.
The very end of Perek Aleph, right? We talked about there's three kinds of seeds. You have tavua, grain. Then you have kitnius and zerina gina. Oh, so zerina gina. So so grains and kitnius, and so zerina gina would include
beans grow above ground.
Good. Yeah,
They grow on a stalk.
Yeah. So right. Okay. Sorry, I stand corrected. In Hilchos Kilayim, at the end of Perek Aleph, the end of Halacha Ches, it says clearly that Zerina Gina, a subcategory of them is Yerek. So Yerek and Zerina Gina are the same thing. So the things in Halacha Gimel will tackle only the Chal Chaim and the Rabbanon. Yeah. So or you could say that really these things, like say turnips, the Zerina Gina is the turnip and the Yerek is the leafy part on top.
Oh, that's
also possible. Okay,
all these types of vegetables, they grow under the ground. They're called tubers.
So
the only thing that stick above the ground is the leafy part.
Okay, so I'm not sure that's, but yeah. So based on that, what he says in Hilchos Kilayim,
horseradish, carrots.
Okay, good. So based on Perek Aleph in Hilchos Kilayim, Perek Halacha Ches, it could be that that's what he's saying over here as well. Or it could be Yerukos over here in general means vegetables is a much more general category. Okay, let's just touch vegetables and pastures. Okay, Zayin. In our fish Trumos and Meiser, you don't separate Truma and Meiser from vegetables and Chutz La'aretz. Even though we just said the Chaim D'Rabbanan, that's only Eretz Yisrael. Even though there's certain places we did say Truma Fish and Meiser that you are mafresh Truma and Meiser in Chutz La'aretz. We said Bavel right yesterday, but those places, even that's only those things that are Chaim and Eretz Yisrael. You bring the vegetables from Chutz La'aretz into Eretz Yisrael. Alpha Pishesh, Alpha Bekaraya. Even though they're coming on a ship with growing on like a artificial, earth, Haveza Potter, not artificial, it's real earth, but not kind of now. It's Potter. The Lord God's love, you weren't going on it. Hatvu about kidney is on the York. Now, grain and legumes that you planted them for their vegetation, but you want to eat the stalk, right? Today they make all kinds of bread out of the stalk of the wheat, not just the kernel. But that person, he's considered to be an outlier from human normalcy. But Yarak Shalem Potter, and therefore, even though he's going to eat the leafy part of the whatever part of the stalk of the bean that's not the actual grain, he's part of from Truma Meiser. He can eat it without taking Truma Meiser, and the seed part is Chayv Truma Meiser because that's normal grain. Today you buy these kind of like shahakal b'hadamah breads that are made from like parts of
they're made from the clipper,
from chaff and from the stalk, not the actual thing. Therefore, it's to have shahakal b'hadamah. That one holds that at least maybe today is different, but in the times of Rambam, for sure, the din was that the potter from Truma Meiser. Okay, ches hatilton, which is basically kind of chilba apparently. Even though people can't eat it when it becomes too hard. Since most people do eat it when it's not hard yet in the beginning, therefore it's chayav truma. Even though now it's hard to eat. If you're eating it, you chayav and ma'aser and truma. So that you don't say that it's potter, you chayav and truma ma'aser till it gets hard, then it becomes potter. That's not the case. Once it's chayav, it stays chayav. Test the elu truma ma'aser. These are the things. Now that's as far as species goes. Let's talk about halachic status, right? If you think about what's chayav and truma ma'aser. Wheat for sure, barley for sure, wine for sure. But now we're going to say these are cases of these things that are potter from truma ma'aser. Right, when the poor person collects the leket shikampaya, we explain what it is. That parrot and the grapes which fall about lilies and the underdeveloped grape clusters, right? They don't have the ripe, not fully ripe. Even if the poor person collects a lot, right? He hits the jackpot and he collects from all the fields. Now this poor guy has a whole pile of grain. Still, he's potter from Truma Ma'aser. If he, however, makes a whole silo out of it in the field, it becomes established to be requiring Ma'aser before eating. Truma Ma'aser requires Ma'aser to be taken from it because of Maris Ayin. It looks like he has his own silo. If you see people eating from it without Truma Ma'aser, it looks like he's an Aveda. Also, if he does this in the city, Patur, then it's part of Trumaiser. Sharei Koil Yesh Lahan. Everyone has. It's like a talk of town. This poor guy got a whole silo full of wheat. He collected, right? That everyone knows it's like a shechim peah, and no one thinks that this poor guy got his own silo, right? So the poor guy, he's lucky to hit the gvir, all the gvir and all the shuls. He has a whole lot of cash. No one thinks he's wealthy. All right, good. So now I'm going to tell us in hilchos Melachim that if a guy wants to do any mitzvah, to be mekabel schai, is allowed to. The guy says, I want to do a mitzvah, I want to separate peah. The guy chooses to do that. Then the poor people do have to separate ma'aser and truma. Why? Because he's not chayv like a shechul peah. Essentially, it's a gift from the guy to the yid, and therefore he has to separate ma'aser and truma. Elim can hifki if the guy is mafkiv it and you're claiming him hefker not from the guy. That's the way out of it. You have underdeveloped grain and oils, grain and olives that are not a third ripe yet. At that point, they're not yet chayv and truma. So if you're going to make olive oil from these underdeveloped grapes, you're going to make grain or flour from these underdeveloped wheat. You could, but you're not chayv to take ma'aser and truma. I'm not sure about bikurim. I think you are. How do you know if it's a third yet? Let's say I didn't know. I come to the field and I buy from the guy, or someone inherits his father. He didn't know the guy had a field. How does he know how ripe it is? If you plant it and it grows, but do a shevi shlish, then you know produce a third. So you guys take a sample from the field, plant it, and see what happens. If it grows, then the whole field was obviously a third ripe. If not, it wasn't a third ripe. Until the wheat's a third ripe, it can't produce other wheat. And if it can't do that, it's not yet in the meiser stage. If you're going to eat from grain that was less than a third ripe, you're not chayav to take truma meiser yet. It only becomes meiserable or chiv meiser and truma once it reaches a third of its development, or once it reaches a stage where it's able to produce other produce. It's a funny lashon because it says transgressed. I'm not sure if it's transgressed.
And what does it say? And how do we know if it was not? If it grew a third, how do we know?
No. Well, you go take a field. You're not sure if this wheat field is a third of its development yet. Take a sample and plant it. If it produces new wheat, it's past a third. If not, it's not a third. Or if it's not a diet. It could be just that the ground isn't that. But if it does produce a new crop, then it's for sure 1/3 of its stage.
Under a third, it can't produce it.
Correct. That's exactly the point of it's called anas meiser. Yeah, and when it comes to grain. Now all of over here fish I'm to transgress. The is not a transgression. It's silly. Or unless I guess the word is over. In other words, he was mafresh from the grain and from the oil that did not grow a third. In other words, I have two fields, 100 pounds here, 100 pounds there. I have to take 2%, right? For truma meiser. How much is 2%? 2 pounds from this field, 2 pounds from this field. So instead of taking the 2 pounds from each, I'll do very simple. I'll take 4 pounds from this field. Now this field didn't grow a third yet. So my truma meiser is no good. If I do that, the truma is not truma. Therefore, I did not commit to truma, and non-kohen can eat it, and the rest of the field is considered not good truma. It's considered tevel. If you eat it, you chayv misirav. The chena hefker, if it's ownerless, part of truma meiser, it's part of truma meiser, right? You come, guys in the wilderness, comes across wild wheat, he can take it and bake bread. No truma meiser necessary. Even if the guy dafke made it ownerless, with the intention.
Where is he going?
Because before we were talking about.
Oh, by my Ram it says because
before in Allah you take a look at let's patient guy come to
yeah, but what does it say about you?
It doesn't say the word good. It doesn't say good, but assuming Allah you
No, it says
so Chayam B'Truna El became Hifkir in Allah Yud starts like that. So we
feel Hifkiru Hagoy, even if the guy makes it.
Interesting. So let's start again. The Chena Hefkir, Potem Natruma Meisers. Vafilu Hifkiru Hakoil, Umazolas. Sorry, Hakoil. Okay, interesting. Okay, I'm not sure how you're supposed to understand that. I feel like I'm not sure what that means. What's the alternative? But me also says Hagoy. It's supposed to be Hagoy, and that's a I don't know. Okay, here it says even if the guy is mafkirit. So in other words, even though by a guy, mafkir is like a type of neder, a guy is not mechuyev in a door. Alpha became in this context, it's effective. So b'chal when a guy makes something hefker, it's effective. However, if a person plants or sows wheat in a field that's hefker, chayav truma meiser, he's chayav to truma meiser from the crop because even though the land is hefker, the crop belongs to him. Good base. Hefker kama v'zachaba. Now, if a guy is standing grain, it's growing, And he says this grain standing here is hefker, and then he or somebody else is zeicha. He's kainit by doing whatever action of kinyan you acquire standing grain. All of him for shemen and truma, and then again he's over. He separates truma from it. Even though we said if it's hefker, it's not chayv and truma, so I can't separate truma. I don't have to, but also I can't. If I say I'm going to separate this truma for all 10 of my fields from this hefker wheat, that doesn't work. That's why it says he transgressed. And truma is not considered truma. Anytime you separate truma from something which is not chayv and truma, and it's truma, you can't volunteer truma. It has to be chayv and truma, the truma to work. So if I have some grain which is not chayv and truma, and some grain which is, I can't say this pile is not chayv. I'm going to separate truma voluntarily for both piles. Doesn't work. You have to take truma from something which is chayv and truma. The same thing applies. There's things which people don't normally plant in a garden or a field. The assumption is hefker. You part from truma, even though you planted it. I'm sorry. No, the assumption is hefker. That's what you put through. You can assume it's not. I don't remember how this get it. Did I plant this? Whatever. You can assume it got weird, wild, and you don't have to take truma ma'aser. You're gonna shumal bechi. Shumal bechi is a kind of onion that makes people, a garlic that makes people cry. It's very strong. Shumal bechi, right? Bechi means crying. But the onions are vrichba. Someplace in yeah. V'gardish hakilkali, the Sicilian bean. I should bring up the collection. Go to the Chinese market, collect all these things, bring them in. V'adashim ba'mitzvahs and Egyptian lentils. These are all things that you're not chayav truma ma'aser. You can assume that they're hefker yid gimel. This orav davish chayav truma davish and chayav chayav. What happens if I have something which is chayav truma? Get this which is not chayav truma. Going zeisei nikuf shes orav bezeisei masik. You have olives that were gathered by the poor people, by payer, exactly.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
If it's why do we have to command that chaskasim hefker?
Because the example I give was the guy doesn't remember if he planted them or not. But
What's that?
The example I give was a guy sees these things growing, and it's a shumbal bechi growing in his garden. He doesn't remember. Did I plant this? How did it get over here? Maybe I planted it. I don't remember. So if he planted it, it's his. So.
But aren't one saying that itself it makes it part of truma?
No, because if I choose to plant this thing, no, it says chaskos min hefker. The vart is the assumption is hefker.
Why? Why do I have to come out to hefker?
No, because if it's taka mine, I'm taka chayev.
Why?
Why am I chayev? Because when you intentionally,
it's not something that people plant.
No, because again, the vart is in order to be chayav in truma, it has to be something which people. If I choose to plant a garden full of it, it's guarded, it's human consumption, and what was the third one?
even though most people don't do that.
And it's vegetation, right? It's guarded. It's human. It's human consumption. It goes to the ground. Most people don't. I did, so therefore it's chayav in truma. But if I don't know the status of it, is it belong to, let's say, my parents' house and they're away in the backyard?
So we'll just assume
because
most people don't do it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you can assume it's hefker. If you can assume it's hefker, then if you know for sure it's hefker, if it's a wheat, you're potter, right? Good. To the question, if I'm not sure, the verse is if these things are bechazak, I can line the chazak. You give them. The sorrow of davish is chayav and truma davish and chayav. What happens if I have two piles, two things? One's chayav, one's not, and obviously the same species, which I can't differentiate because if it's olives and grapes, it's not a problem, right? And they get mixed together. You have olives look the same. One type of olives that was paya, right? Exactly paya, and the olives that were collected by the owner. Or for example, you have grapes the poor people collected because they weren't developed, they didn't have the shoulders and the drip, right, the proper shape. Right? You have grapes that I harvested myself. So now they're mixed together. What do we do? So if I have, let's say I have 50 pounds of each, and now mix together 100 pounds, I don't know which is what. If I have a whole other crop of grapes, then I go to the other crop, I take truma for it plus truma from this one, wherever it is, and now the whole thing is the truma. If all I have is over here, this, I don't have anything else. In that case, what you do is, you take truma meiser for everything, as if everything is chayav and truma. Now, theoretically, you want to be a mathematician, it's possible that I separated, let's say, for example, let's say it's half and half, right? So 50 pounds of regular grapes, 50 pounds of grapes from leket, or let's say whatever that the poor person collected. So my 50 pounds of chayav and truma, 1 pound, which is 2%. His is not chayav anything. What happens if you want to say, if I separate truma, who says my pound I'm separating is all consists of truma that chayv and truma? Maybe I'm separating only half a pound or three quarters of a pound of truma. Because again, any grapes that originally the poor person collected, they're not truma valid. Apparently, now I'm saying when you treat the whole thing as truma meiser, in this case, instead of separating 1 pound of truma, I'm going to separate 2, right? 1 for each set of 50. I have the right to rely that the math is in my favor and that the truma goes on everything. It's going to be at least whatever is necessary. Okay, because the chayra, you could separate. I could say even if I separate half for truma, maybe that half I took was all the grapes of the poor guy, and all my grapes now are still tevel. So apparently you're allowed to use the math over here. Now that's truma. Ma'aser, remember, even though I have a chiv to separate, it's not holy. It's just monetary obligation for the levy. Therefore, comes to ma'aser, I can separate only 10% of 50, not a full 100. Because the other 50 is not chayiv, and I give it to the Levi and show my soul. You're doubt. What do you do with truma?
Because it doesn't have the condition.
Correct. You doubt truma. What do you do with truma? The kohen goes to the kohen. Whether it's her or tamei. I feel even if before you separated truma and ma'aser b'chlal, the whole a dead person, a mace passed away in the factory where the wheat is. He fell into the grinding machine or something, and now, sorry, and now, now all the duggan is tamei. You still separate truma and give it to the kohen. So what do you do? He's a chayil afish man truma to the kohen. You must separate truma, give to the kohen. Shemar says, "Vanina sat l'chas v'sheres." I give you the guardianship of my truma. It's theirs. Regardless of his tamei or tar. What do you do with it? If it's pure, they eat it. But if it's tamei, they benefit from its burning. If it's oil, they burn it and they make it for light. If it's grain, it's anything else like that. You can use it as fuel for the oven. If it's wine that's processed, what do they do with it? I have no idea. The chayr that they have to just pour down the drain.
How about some
No, you're not allowed to do that. Even if it's tummy. I don't think so. Tezvav. The chayin trumas meiser, the same thing. The trumas meiser, which a Levi separates for him, his meiser gives to the kohen. In mitmei, so it's meiser. The same thing applies. If it becomes tummy after separation, or tummy when it's still part of the meiser before separation, you separate it in tumah state. In taz the kohen, the harness specific, you give the kohen to benefit from its burning. Design. Call mafish truma gedela trumas meiser. Whenever you separate trumas gedela or trumas meiser, if you're a Levi, or if you're not a Levi, you separate it yourself, which you can do. You're not supposed to, but it works. Before you separate, you make the bracha. As you do in any mitzvah, like we said, the bracha lahafresh truma or al hafresh truma. I don't recall which one. It's zayin.
What do you mean that doesn't work?
In other words, if I separate meiser 10% for the Levi, and before I give it to I separate trumas meiser for the kohen instead of him, it works. You're not supposed to do that, but it works. Okay, it's zayin. Take truma from. You don't export truma. I feel tameya even if it's tummy. The aim of being truma are large. You don't bring truma from chutz. So we don't want the kahan to get all attracted. Wow, look at these apricots from Chile. We're going to go to Chile because you're not supposed to go out to leave Eretz Yisrael. If you bring it to Eretz Yisrael, don't eat it. The peishim, it's Eretz Amim. By you says Eretz Amim. Eretz Amim. Okay, so that's the censors, right? The chazam etakana that the airspace of chutz la'aretz is tamei midrabanan. Therefore, you can't eat it. It's truma tameya. Well, it's you can't burn it. But why can't you burn it if it's tamei? People aren't going to. People should not say they're eating truma. We saw truma that was never tamei. Came off the boat. Everyone was started burning it. But so they're going to think it's okay. That's not okay. Therefore, because of wrong perception, you don't burn it either. But you don't export it back to chutz la'aretz. Shamirim people say you might see in truma chutz la'aretz. So it's okay to export truma. It's not okay. What do you do with it? You let it sit in the side until it becomes tamei, a clear truma. So by somehow or other, although you can't make it happen on purpose, because you're not even tamei. It's only tamei d'rabbanan. You're not allowed to make it tamei on purpose. You have to leave it.
So why gonna come and impose truma then on chutz la'aretz on certain places? Like
the poor people. Because that's So that truma we said. Oh, you're saying good question. Truma and Bavel, what do you do with it?
You're telling me over here. That chutz la'aretz you're not allowed to bring it to Eretz Yisrael.
So that's a good question. If you look at Pergaf, I don't remember what's the answer to that. I don't know.
After that, the kohen can't even benefit for it. So what is it?
Could be the only reason why you separate. Could be the only reason why you separate truma is to have the option of meiser afterwards. I'm not sure though. That's a good question. So you have to wait till somehow it becomes by itself tamei. Or if Erev Pesach arrives, if it was chametz, so if you burn it, or of course if it rots beyond edible consumption, then you just you do away with it. You catch a good catch. I'm not sure what the answer. Look up in Perik.
Research, yeah.
Okay, so Taka, what's now you got my curiosity.